I have sometimes had the feeling that being a Barr colonist or being a descendant of a Barr colonist is a bit of a status symbol, because his mom always seemed very proud of it, and Fred's aunts and uncles too. You know, it was always talked about with a bit of, you know, we're important, we were Barr colonists kind of thing.
Ooh, wow. I sure wasn't expecting that.
Okay, happy birthday. Then you can blow.
Yeah, wow.
Blow and do your wish. Now, while you were doing all your reading, you wanted one particular item, so happy birthday.
Oh, thanks so much. Oh, boy. Oh, so it is in print. You thought maybe it was out of print.
Actually, it's a used copy, and you better explain to Shauna what it's all about.
Uh-huh.
Because Shauna doesn't know anything about it.
Okay, this is a Barr Colony book. This book here sort of redeems Reverend Barr's reputation to quite an extent.
What happened was that he was able to borrow a copy of this book that he has to give back. So he wanted this book, and I went on the internet and found it.
Here.
All right. You want the first piece, Shauna? Sure.
Here.
All right. I agree with him.
It's quite the thing, you know, to be in the town you're born in on your 70th birthday. That's really amazing. And it wasn't actually planned that way either, you know. It just turned out to be here this time.
Those who emigrated from Britain itself often tended to come as individual families. So it's not often that you have a concerted, identifiable colony like you did for the Barr colony. So that it's a unique example to see how the British acted as an ethnic group like others in that context.
The project began essentially with Isaac Barr. He was interested in British colonization, 1903 or earlier actually. This is a time when the British Empire is virtually at its peak.
Lloyd himself was English, from England, whereas Barr was from Ontario. So there's going to be probably a difference of degree there in terms of where their focus is in that sense. And I think Lloyd also worked for a time for Church Missionary Society, so that he was geared toward Anglican outreach in a sense. And both Barr and Lloyd were convinced that Canada had to have settlers, particularly settlers of British birth, so that Canada could remain in the hands of the British. So it was very much a patriotic endeavor on their part as well, to bring over a particular English settlement in that sense.
Usually was difficult to attract immigrants to Canada. And so anyone that was proposing to bring a group of people got special consideration, and Mr. Barr took advantage of that. So he had secured the homestead rights and to a block of land, and then he promoted it as a settlement possibility. The response in Britain was overwhelming.
We now have 5 grandchildren, and I'm hoping that I can get one of those interested enough to carry on where I eventually have to leave off, even if it's 50 or 75 years down the road, that somebody could pick it up and carry right on. Okay, Shauna, just up the road here on the left side is the North Battleford Cemetery. And apparently there are approximately 200 members of the Barr colony buried there as well. And one of them was George Edward Brown. He was the great-grandfather of Fred, is right here.
1857 to 1949.
1857 is when he was born in Yorkshire in England. And he died in 1949. This would be your great,
yeah, three greats.
grandfather,
Yeah,
three great-grandfathers.
Yeah, because he's my great-grandfather, so your dad would be the great-great-grandfather, and so you'd be the great-great-great-granddaughter.
Yeah.
He was original Barr Colonist, him and his wife Louisa.
You ready to go, you guys? Let's go.
The Barr Colonists came on a number of different ships, but the primary vessel was the SS Lake Manitoba, and there's a lot of journal entries which support that trip was very difficult. There was no first class, so people were traveling in quite difficult accommodations.
People were in some ways already dissatisfied with Barr on the ship. And in part it had to do with, in some ways he was too successful. Too many people joined up. And so what he had expected would be a modest group ended up being over 2,000, between 2,000 and 3,000 people who wanted to come. And he just wasn't prepared for it.
The seasickness is of course very featured. People were very, very ill. The food was reported to not have been to people's liking. And even back on the ship, people were starting to rumble about being dissatisfied with Barr and feeling that he was not delivering on his promises.
Many ethnic groups, when they come and they settle in communities like the Barr Colonists did, they can have problematic founding fathers, that's what I call them. That in many ways, the promises that the founding father, and if we look at Isaac Barr in that role, makes, those promises just can't be kept.
In the morning, the water would be poured out in that bowl and was used for washing your face and your hands and your neck if you were really careful. Now, back in those days, there were, instead of having...
Rural life is disappearing, so that in some ways it's probably part of a nostalgic movement in that sense, this rediscovery of where people came from. And sort of 1960s plus, people became more curious about their ethnic origins because they were looking for a much simpler past, nostalgia for the days before life became a rat race, complicated, etc., etc. It's more pure, it's more natural. So there were these ethnic searches that in some ways become caught up with genealogy as well. But it also is reflected in ethnic dance, let's say, or trips to the homeland, that kind of thing to search out the culture.
Nothing like today's post office, hey?
Yeah.
No. For the people who went, it's probably partly for economic reasons. For some, it was probably the adventure, because that's always the case. And for some, it was probably always as well this idea that you were doing your part for empire. And particularly if you were a veteran of the Boer War, you already had that tradition built into you, because obviously service in the Boer War would be understood as another service to empire.
Willie Rendell, probably the first homesteader in what is now Lloydminster, when he was asked about Barr, he said, well, personally he didn't have any complaint about him, and He was set up and homesteading and doing well.
This is the window that looks into the kind of the living room.
An outing like this is a good way to keep everything in mind and read the books on Barr Colony and sort of like that, and you won't find it boring. It's very informative and very entertaining. Some of the books are some a good belly laughs in them. You see the table there underneath there. See the ornate center part supporting the table and the chairs themselves.
No electricity. You have to wash your dishes by hand.
Yeah, that's right, sure. There's a lot more labor involved then. You'd have to bring wood in for the stove to keep that going.
And the silver on the table, you'd have to polish it. I think we'll make you live in a place like this for a couple of weeks.
I don't think I'd survive.
There's some beautiful John Deere tractors. There's on the prairies. They used to have a riddle to get people to figure it out. It was a riddle, a farmer's fiddle, alive at both ends and dead in the middle.
I can see that they're both having a lot of fun, especially my Opa, because he gets to see a lot of things that he was growing up with, and he got to be here for his 70th birthday, so I think he's pretty excited about that.
Okay, ladies first.
I think she's pretty excited. I've always known that she's loved genealogy and stuff.
Oh wow, look at this.
Wow.
It's tiny compared to my church.
Yeah.
Actually, I never knew that the churches that they had were that small. Can only fit like 30 to 40 people in them.
Their journey by rail ends in Saskatoon, and I think that this is one of the hardest things for the Barr Colonists. I'm not sure they were really sure where the railway would end in relation to the lands that Barr had secured for them, and they actually had something of a long trek ahead of them in that it was 200 miles.
I'd say as far as an iconic image is concerned, and the Barr Colonists, the photograph that seems to be the most important is the picture of the tents pitched in Saskatoon. Now that shows up over and over and over again, as though if there's one image that seems to capture the trek, the journey itself, it's that. And maybe it's also psychologically, romantically important because it marks the end of the trip by rail, and now they're starting off on the real test. It's the last leg to where they're going. They're going off into the unknown. As one old-timer's account, he says, there was a trail, you followed it, but you had no idea what was at the end of that trail at all. So I think that picture, just on the moment of leaving, and it's still the group coherent, it's extremely important.
I've been doing a Kalim Porter list where me and my best friend Jessie Elise are having a contest. Whoever can get 5,000 I Love Kalim Porters first wins being the bigger fan. So I don't think she has a chance of winning though, because she's probably only at like 600 or 700 and I'm at 1900 now. So I'll probably, by the end of tonight, I'll probably be done 2300 or 2200, around there.
The last time we were here, this mural wasn't here. It's totally new, I think. At least we never saw it. Isaac Barr, the one on the right, and George Lloyd in the red outfit. They were both ministers of the Church of England. And then farther it shows the development. There's the little church that they built out of the logs as one of the first buildings here. And it shows the railroad coming here, and that was until a couple of years later. Oxen pulling the plows, so it's the picture kind of shows the first few years of the development here. Yeah, got that one.
A lot of the blame for people coming into the difficult circumstances, that blame seems to rest with Barr. People tend to sometimes blame him that he painted the wrong picture for them and made it sound easier than it really was.
The only major settlement in between was at Fort Battleford. So again, they stopped there and sort of had a regrouping. That's actually where the meeting occurred, where Barr was formally replaced as leader with Reverend Lloyd.
He took over, and he was always more, from what you read, more cautious about the venture than Barr was. So the better head, the more level head, and he made a go of it. The problem was that the Barr colonists tended to be not farmers. Most of them were urban occupations, and for them the huge adjustment to prairie living was to run a farm, run a homestead.
You hear, for example, of stories where people didn't realize that oxen could graze, so they would try to clip the grass with scissors or some, so you hear a lot of stories like that. Or people couldn't harness their animals. If they were unharnessed, they wouldn't be able to remember how to put their harness back on. There's a lot of accounts in the journals I've read of animals getting lost. They weren't tethered correctly, so they would wander off. So huge amounts of time would be spent trying to secure livestock that had wandered away. It was just a very, very difficult journey for them.
One of the things that they've always said about the Barr colonists, that even though they might not have known about farming when they first came, they lucked onto good soil, so that once they mastered farming techniques, they had good quality soil to work with, and they prospered. Now, if I were going to take you to a Barr colonist experience, I would probably take you to Northminster Church, which is directly north of Lloyd on the Meridian on the left-hand side. It's a beautiful, tiny Anglican church that you can imagine Anglicanism at work, at play, at worship there. A tiny cemetery that includes Barr colonists, and then it also has recent graves. But that would be one place where you could go today, I think, and get a sense of Barr colony as community in the past.
So were you related to the Perrys that lived just...
Ted and Delia?
Yes.
Yes, they were his aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And they're buried in the back there.
Yeah, they're brother and sister.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
They're husband and wife, brother
Yeah,
and sister.
and they lived just down the way here.
Yeah. This cemetery and in Lloydminster and other cemeteries
16.
in the general area, they all had those little flags. It looked fairly colorful back then. Yeah.
May the 8th, 1916.
She died too young.
Yeah.
They got swamp fever.
We didn't have that problem.
Right now I'm kind of more into my teen stuff than genealogy. I think I might even like carry on what my own was doing when I get older, maybe. Because that's what she said she hoped for one of us to do, so I might do that.
She's sitting
Yeah,
in the back
it's
seat
still neat.
writing
We're going
away.
over bumps and my writing's still neat. Well, neat enough.
Yeah, no, it's
I
good
can't
on
read
the
the car
test.
either.
I kind of see how I'm really, really spoiled compared to the way we were. Like, my opa used to shred toilet paper out of magazines, so. And my stepmom in the store just the other day asked me what kind of toilet paper I liked the best, so.
Did you guys hear that? Uncle Ralph walked 2.5 miles to school.
Yeah.
And 2.5 miles
Yeah.
home again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uphill both ways.
How do you be British and ethnic when you form part of the dominant culture? And especially when you're spread out across the country. But around Lloydminster and in the rural municipality of Britannia, which is what they became, you had this concentrated group of English immigrants who all came together, and that's going to have something to do with your sense of identity, isn't it? If you all come on the same boat, you all cross the country on the same train, you all go through the same hardships. So you've got a collective identity from the beginning. So that's going to be what feeds Lloydminster's sense of roots. And I'd say it's still there, that Barr Colonist origins in Lloydminster are important.
I would like to toast to Tanya having a healthy, healthy baby.
We're all doing to that.
And in the future, she's going to teach that baby to ask questions so we can pass the family story on to that one. Prost.
Toast.
You don't like who can touch any.
Yes, you can touch.